So we'll make a start, colleagues. So again, welcome to the second session from our series of the Beyond the Gates webinar series, where we're looking at co-creation of aspirational curriculum pathways here. I'm delighted to be joined today by a fantastic colleague, Sarah LeGood. I've known Sarah for a long time, and Sarah does the most amazing work in Derby City and has a huge impact across our city and way beyond that, again, with the various hats and roles that she has there. Sarah, someone really passionate about challenging sort of the established norms in education and having the highest aspirations and ambitions for young people with additional needs. And as across all of this series, we're really looking at signposting and sharing of practice, looking at that great outcomes, those positive long-term outcomes and what they could be for our students beyond the school gate. So in our first webinar session, we looked that supported internships with Project Search. And again, really excited to hand over to Sarah to really explore the co-creation of those aspirational pathways this afternoon. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Sarah, and a huge thanks to you for joining us this afternoon. Thanks, Sarah.
That's the awful moment where your unmute button decides not to work and you have to then panic. So I do apologise for that, everybody. I'm really grateful for being involved in this, and I think that there's a real key message just in the way that Whole School Send have convened this piece of work and these meetings and these the webinars that we're doing. And for me, it's very much around we are one system, and I genuinely believe that the majority of people that work in this system have one fundamental passion, and that's really about the enablement of the young people that we are all working with. But there are some challenges along the way, and if there weren't challenges along the way, we wouldn't be having this meeting and we wouldn't need this discussion, because our young people would go through our mainstream education system, their needs would be met, they would have aspirations and ambitions like every other young person, and they would progress and they would just go off and lead really, really average lives, but they would lead those average lives with meaning. And I don't think that's where we are at the moment. So I think we do exceptional work, and I know there are several colleagues in this whose work I really respect, and the other schools that I work alongside in the city that I serve, their work is amazing, but there is a long way to go. And so what I'm hoping to do today is share some reflections on what I've been able to do at the organisation that I'm really fortunate to work in, and really look at what would be even better if. So we know that there are some really good parts, but actually we also know that there are some things that fundamentally we as a system are still not getting right, and the system is only as good as the people that are implementing it. So that's the kind of starting point. So thank you ever so much, Alistair. And it's going to be tricky because it's going to be a hard act to follow, because Debbie and Claire did their session last week on really creating work-ready pathways into supported internships. So I'm not going to really talk a lot about supported internships. I'm going to talk a lot about how we use the curriculum flexibility in our post-16 curriculum to develop routes into work, and then how we create arm's length support, so the opportunities for our young people and their parents and carers and their wider circles of support to kind of keep an arm's length contact with us as a provider, to make sure that as the world changes and flexes, that there is some ongoing support in place. So the work I do at the college is being commissioned by the Department for Education, and very similar to the Whole School Send provision, we are part of the Send Centres for Excellence, and we're working collaboratively with Nathan and have been for probably the last year, to really make sure that we're stretching and challenging ourselves around our working practices, so that there isn't a division between statutory, school age and post-16 provision, that there is one seamless system. So that's the work we've been doing. There are 3 centres for excellence led by 3 general further education colleges. The people strand around staff development and really sharing expertise in developing the workforce that works with young people with inclusion needs is led by Western. Community and real key toolkits and resources around engagement and employment is led by City College Norwich, Elaine Dale. And Elaine, interestingly, has just been commissioned to develop a quality framework for supported internships. So that's just at the stage now where it's going through review with a variety of professionals, but really, really interesting stuff for us in light of the new supported internship guidance that was released only yesterday by the government. And all three of the Centres for Excellence are just around enabling progression. So the strand we lead is on curriculum, and hopefully you'll see in some of the presentation today how we use the flexibility of personalised learning, developing person-centred responses, and the kind of the study programme flexibility at post-16. So they're the kind of things that we go out and work with others on. If you're interested to know any more of that, there'll be an email address at the end, but there's some super resources on the Send Excellence Gateway, very similar to the resource gateway that NASEN have. So there's really good expertise in the sector already. And I think we could all do with taking some time to look what's there, rather than I feel like I'm constantly trying to reinvent the wheel. So there's opportunity for there. The project team that I work alongside at the college have been working in a particular way for the past 8 years. So we have adopted an approach that the Education Inspection Framework, the SEN Code of Practice, the Equality Act, the Maynard Review around inclusive apprenticeships, the Skills White Paper, and all of those things that we are responding to as a sector are all minimum benchmarks. So the Ofsted Outstanding grade is the minimum expectation for us to deliver excellence to our young people. So that continuous improvement model has been really key. And we use a particular method of change, which is called design thinking. And it's an absolutely ideal mechanism to use with young people who've got inclusion needs. Now, interestingly, some of the language that's used across the sector, I really struggle with. And so I'll be very deliberate in my explanation. We don't have SEN at Derby College. We don't have additional needs. Those needs are not additional to the young person that we're talking about. They are that young person. Somebody is dyslexia, autism, you know, physical disability. It's one element or one attribute of them. It's not the full descriptor. And so I really work hard to try and challenge myself to speak positively and be attribute based in my approach. So when we're looking at those labels that young people have, or we call somebody an EHCP pupil or an EHCP student, we are dehumanizing them. And part for me is about recognition of validity in the human race for us all. So I really do try and use inclusive language in all I do. Our model is based in the social model of disability, and the team and I actively identify as inclusion allies. And we did a big piece of work on really defining what we wanted as a whole organisation, and then as two specialist provisions that sit within that from a curriculum delivery point of view, and then for the inclusion team that serves the whole college. And what did we want? What was our mission? And so our young people supported us to develop our mission, which is really simple. It's enabling everyone. Very deliberately, it's not empowering anyone, because I don't have any power. Young people already have power. We have to enable them to use it. So there's something key in that for me. And we do ask our teams to sign an inclusion pledge. And it's really to start the conversation about what do we mean by inclusion. So I don't mean an inclusion unit that a young person goes to be taught. I don't mean a department. I mean an ethos, a way of being and a way of living. And our society should be built to include everybody. So we should be looking at that social model of disability. Sometimes, and Alistair will tell you, sometimes these conversations require a little bit of agitation. So we have to challenge the way we use language. It's called the SEN Code of Practice, so everybody calls it SEN. So if it was called the Philip Code of Practice, everybody would call it Philip. Well, I'm going to choose to call it inclusion, and I'm going to choose to offer my young people opportunities to enable themselves to make choice. And I think that's all we can all really do in life. So I will agitate and I will challenge, but that's always from the point of compassion. So quite often, I think people feel bad because they don't know how to deal with language or description around disability or around people's other intersectionalities, whether they're a Muslim, whether they are gay, whatever it is. And so we have to be compassionate, and we have to enable people to ask questions and ask challenge questions, really, in order to help them look at and modify the language that they use. And we do quite a lot of trauma-informed working, and I know that there's at least one colleague on this who works with, you know, young people whose parents and carers have suffered extreme trauma during the raising of their young person, and they felt they've had to battle for everything. So there's something really powerful for me about compassion and about active listening, that acknowledgement of people's experience. We can't undo it, can we? But we can really support parents and carers to understand that the enablement of their young person and that lovely, rich adult life, it will really enable them to live a healthy, long life. So that's the compassion for me. So we really start with our kind of aspiration. And if we think of the Ofsted Education Inspection Framework, this goes right back to the intent element of that for me. Yesterday, the government released its supported internship guidance with revisions. And so there's a tiny quote, and I don't expect you to read it, but the key for me is preparation. So with the right preparation, young people can achieve sustainable employment. So just going back to the bit about compassionate agitation, if we look at the final sentence, however, evidence in post-16 education and labour market activities and outcomes shows that pupils with SEND are less likely to be in sustained employment 15 years after Key Stage 4. How many pupils do you know that go to work? And how many people that you employ have SEND? So I actually think that that sentence could be rewritten to say that the labour market intelligence shows us that young people who progressed 15 years ago are less likely to be in work. So it's those big descriptors which I think rob us of the definition of our young people. So the guidance is worth looking at, and I think it will be revisited in the green paper that's going to be coming out around the SEN review. So just to go back to intent, are we doing today what we need to do as practitioners working with young people to equip them and prepare them for decision making and for employment tomorrow? And the reality is that the young people that are in schools now, who are 12 years old, will go into a job, and 65% of those jobs don't yet exist. And so one of the things I've been reading about quite a lot in the past week is about jobs and career development in the metaverse. So this is around things like the Internet of Things and using a whole variety of machine learning and machine technology, robotics. And we have young people who want to work in those fields, and yet as a practitioner, I know relatively little about them. So do we know what the job markets look like and how our communities, whether we've got devolved responsibility in our local authorities or not, what our communities need from their young people? What jobs do we need to be able to equip people to do and fill? And I think the reality is we have to remember that the majority of the young people that we are talking about, particularly those who have cognitive impairment, they're likely to go into part-time work, and they're likely to be entry-level jobs, but they'll do those entry-level jobs extraordinarily well. So what are we planning for? And I'm not going to labour on data because Debbie and Claire really covered it in detail last week and gave us really good information. But basically, the numbers of young people, or not so young people, but the numbers of people with learning disability in work is declining. So previously it was 6%, and I believe it's now 5.3%. Now there's a labour market crisis, there's an employment crisis in our health and social care settings and in our NHS. We can't recruit enough staff, and yet we've got masses of young people, or not so young people, who are sitting at home who could fill those posts with the right support. So I think there's something really key around that for me. And we've had real success where we've worked with some of our young people who want to go into the caring professions or want to go into supporting other students, and we've become their employer. So I think there's real opportunity for innovation around how we recruit those young people. So we've done year-long job interviews through placement provision. We have done active work around job carving and around removing parts of the job that we know a young person is not going to be able to do, but we've given those parts of the role to somebody else. and then we've kind of enhanced what the young person can do, and we employ them in the same terms and conditions as everybody else, and they get the same training and development as everybody else. And that's for us really good practice, because we have to make sure that's inclusive. This is a slide that I've borrowed from NatSpec. It's from a presentation that they did. And there's some quite grim reading about the kind of whether the system that we've got is sustainable as far as the young people that we have and how we support them. But there is light, I think, at the end of the kind of the darkness, because in the bottom of the screen, there are 2 pie charts. So it shows you that in school, 50% of young people with SEN or with an EHCP are placed in special schools, and in colleges they are in the mainstream. So for us as an organisation, our kind of data, and I'll use the simple maths, our data is about 400 young people who've got an EHCP, and of that 400, about 120 of those sit within our 2 specialist curriculum areas. So the vast majority of our students are studying between level 1 and level 3 in the main curriculum, and they are aspiring to go on and to do work and to get jobs. Now, at the end of the presentation, we'll revisit that, because we've got some young people who were in that curriculum and have been successful, and there was still something not quite where they needed it to be in order for them to progress. So we've put a solution in place for those young people based on their individual needs. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and then I'm going to reshare another screen. So I'm going to hopefully share with you a bear with me, I'm clicking away. I'm going to share with you a brief video, and I think there's for me a real analogy between watching this video and the kind of mission that we have and the race that our young people are trying to run. So Alistair, can you just confirm for me that you can see the different screen?
Can't see that screen yet, Sarah.
Bear with me, folks. This is because I'm not adept on Microsoft.
Thanks, Sarah. Just some really important things to kind of reflect on there. The screen's come up now, Sarah, so I'll be quiet, but the data you've shared already, and that idea around 65% of 12-year-olds will have jobs that don't exist yet, I find really, really fascinating. So I will leave you play the video, Sarah, but yeah, fantastic food for thought already. Thank you.
Okay. So one of the things I want to ask you all is to really, if you can, consider that the work we do is about enabling our young people to be part of the race. It's part of the human race. And I'm going to play this video, and it's a video that you probably have seen before. But what I'd really like you to do is, during the video and it's playing, and I won't speak over it, and it's just over 2 minutes long, so there will be a period of silence. But to reflect on the runner that the video focuses on, that's our student. And then I'll talk you through what the kind of analogy is afterwards. Now, I'm sure that you will have seen that before. It's old. It was from 1992. And I can't watch it without feeling a huge amount of emotion. To be honest, I just can't watch it. It's every time. And for me, there are, I think, some reflections, really. So if Derek is our student, and that race is him leaving college or leaving school and getting a job, and he's done all of that preparation, then the moment that his hamstring snaps, the moment that he can't continue the race, the professionals around him tried to get him to stop. And the one person that had him, and the one person that helped him, and the one person that enabled him to gather his resilience and to continue, and to also fend off some of those professionals and some of the people who were trying to intervene, was his dad. And I think our responsibility in this piece of work and this work around our young people is not just to support our young people, it's to get the parents, it's to understand parents and carers have had a systemic experience for a long time about what their young person can't do, will never be able to do. You know, I've got staff in my team who've got young people with inclusion needs, and they were, you know, handed that child and they were told, I'm so sorry. It takes a long time to support people to repair from those fundamental damages, and also to not see that child as worth and as valid. And I'm deliberately going to use the word invalid. So we don't use the word invalid, it's just not politically correct. But our society and the approach that we have is that we are invalidating these young people because we don't expect them to go to work, we don't expect them to have a girlfriend, we don't expect them to have sex. So it's part of that work. And, you know, I'm really passionate about this, and there is some really excellent provision and people I work with across my city who think and feel the same. And I think societally, until we all think and feel the same, we are not doing the best job that we can do. So that's the kind of party political broadcast part done. What we do is we take the study programme guidance and we work with a team of professionals. So they are students, they are parent and carer together forums, they are external employers, they are the providers, they are a local authority, and we tailor every year our curriculum. So we go through a curriculum business planning process where we look at 8 key elements of success, and the performance of our provision, the performance of our students, the numbers that progress into work, the numbers that progress into sustained work, the numbers that have what we call happy accidents along the way. And we'll talk to you a little bit about those happy accidents and how they've evolved as we've gone. But all of that, it rolls together to create our curriculum. The likelihood is, and if we go back to the slide which said preparation in red, the likelihood is that we are starting in the first instance to prepare our young people for part-time work. And there are a few things that I think are really positive around that. I aspire to everybody going to work and working full-time, but it's quite a big ask when a young person has had short days. A school day and a college day are a short day. When they haven't travelled independently, when they haven't had to get up and make sure they've made their own packing up or their own lunch. So there are quite a lot of things that are really positive about part-time work, and we can use that part-time experience to scaffold other things onto. So quite often we'll have a young person who's working part-time and still studying with us part-time. And they're not being funded by the local authority. They're being funded by a whole other route of funding that enables them to maintain that arm's length support, and also do continuous work on skills development and continuous work on developing their CV, or particular things that their employer have told us that they need to be better at this in order to get this job. So that's the kind of the message for us. I think it's really easy to focus on the kind of the difficulties around not being employed. So we all know that there are negative impacts. There are negative impacts on health, and on maintaining healthy behaviours. And when we think of the strands of the preparation for adulthood agenda, there are things to celebrate, and there are really good resources for us all to use. So there are lots of resources around better off in work and supporting parents and carers to understand better off in work calculations, to kind of remove some of that stress of a young person transitioning into more adult life or into a more independent kind of view of the world. So those things for me, the positives are actually a young person's worth can be linked to them having an income and making a choice about where that income is spent, and making a choice about how they socialise and what that looks like, and developing friendships outside their circle of their regular circle of support, whether that be people their parents and carers have never met. You know, they're the norm for lots and lots of young people, and yet often our young people are in really limited social opportunity. They form a core part of our society and they become integral to those employment places. And there's a really clear business case for me around being an inclusive employer. When you're an inclusive employer, the absence rate of your staff who don't have inclusion needs drops. That alone is huge. I know we're in atypical times before anybody says COVID, but I know we're in atypical times. But the fact that other people come to work and they feel more benefit and more reward from their work because they're working alongside a diverse workforce. So I think there are those considerations. So it's not just about stopping the negative impact, it's about enabling the positive impact. And then if you look at that more widely, so beyond the individual, we're actually talking about life-changing things which cumulatively will change all of our lives, because we've got less of spend on adult social care, we've got more happy and productive people and more families which have got time to go and have broader lives because they're not at home with a young person. There's a soft challenge to intergenerational unemployment and to the kind of the expectation that people won't work. So there's something there around that agitation part for me, but quite gently. And I think we can't underestimate the fact that when somebody goes to work and earns their money, they choose where to spend that money. And so there's quite a lot of research about the purple pound, so people with disability and the way they spend their money. And as a business or as an employer, it's really keen to know, you know, if you're a retail business and you're going to take a young person to work with you on a work placement or as a part-time member of staff, if other people with disability or other people with cognitive impairment see that member of staff, they are more likely to shop with you. If your environment is inclusive, people are more likely to spend their money with you. And so there are lots and lots of simple things that people can do. You know, Asda used to regularly run a limited sensory hour of shopping where they didn't have the lights on and they had no music. And those things are important for people with sensory regulation needs, where they can do some of that, but it would be much nicer to have a luxurious walk around a supermarket for an hour without lots of people and lots of noise and lots of light. So we know all of these things, and so my compassionate agitation question is why wouldn't we? We know all of that, so why wouldn't we change? So I think traditionally our standardized curriculum meets a young person who is standard. Well, my personal belief is that no young person is standard. So there's got to be flex and there's got to be ability for change. Yet we've got an education system that even if somebody's had some really significantly impacting trauma, they aren't able to repeat a year. And yet it would be really sensible, I think, in some respects, to do some of those really simple change pieces of work around that to enable those young people to have a different experience, and also to enable parents and carers to focus on some of the social elements of that development. But for me, that relies on us as a group of professionals to actually push ourselves beyond our zone of proximal development. So we consistently ask our young people to stretch and challenge themselves and to do things that they're uncomfortable with and to try things that they've never tried before and to really, really take a moment and push themselves. And yet we will consistently do the same thing year after year. And therefore, no young person is going to make those stretches and changes unless they see that we're doing that ourselves. And my kind of genuine belief is if a young person can see it, they can be it. So it's about us being our authentic selves, and me as an employer making sure that I show through my employment practice that there are young people with inclusion needs who are staff, and they become staff with inclusion needs, and they have an inclusive employment plan, whereas they'd have had an inclusive teaching plan previously. So there is an expectation that we will create study programs, and the study program guidance clearly states that we will tailor programs and we will use the sophistication at our fingertips. And we work quite extensively now with a range of post-16 providers, whether they are specialists, whether they are mainstream general FE colleges, whether they're independent training providers. And we look at the aids and the adaptations that we can use. And we always kind of draw it back to being person-centered. So my specialist curriculum areas here, we've got 220-ish young people, and they are all on an individualized program. No two of them, if it's by coincidence, they've got the same program, but it's more by coincidence than by design. We don't deliver courses in a traditional way. We deliver courses that are tailored around individuals' EHCP outcomes or aspirations, because most of our students, we support them to cease their plan. So it's person-centered. We're always starting with our end in sight, and we're always wanting to know what they already do well, and then what we can do through the curriculum to make that harder. So how can we consolidate those skills and really enable that independence? And we always have to acknowledge that when a young person leaves the previous provider, even if we have crafted that beautiful transition plan that will enable them to run the race and be successful, things change. So COVID's come along and impacted on some of that transition work. We've got young people who have a skills drop. So their skills in one environment are different to another. They can't do things at home they can do at college. They could do things in their previous school that they can't then independently produce when they come to us. And that transition work and kind of enabling that really great transition is something that I think that we can all work on and do a better job of, because that would then enable us to get more speed and more traction with more young people more quickly, rather than us trying to kind of get to know somebody over half an academic year. We could do that much more swiftly. So I think there's something around that piece of work that we can do collaboratively. This is how we develop curriculum. So we would work with an individual through a range of activities. We would get to know them. We would decide on what the core aim is, and all of the kind of coloured arrows down the side of this are the fundamental parts of a study programme if you're not used to working in a study programme environment. So there should always be a core aim, but the core aim could be work experience. So there is flexibility. And we decide, will the core aim have a qualification or not? And if it's not, then we'll use RAPA, which is the recognition and recording of personal achievement or attainment. So is that going to be an employment-based RAPA target, or is it going to be an education-based RAPA target? Is it about unlocking their opportunity to progress to level 1 in sport and progress to level 2 in sport? Or is it about getting them a job in sport, so it's an employment target? Or is it much broader than that, about looking in the first instance at their adult life and looking at some of their work on resilience and on self-management and on being able to be able to socialise it appropriately in a variety of settings? Will they be doing English and maths? So will they be doing a GCSE resit? Or will they be doing a functional skill? Or will we be exempting them from traditional English and maths study using their EHCP? Or will we be using our tolerance? And that's something that most FE colleges know and understand. It's a condition of funding tolerance. But they will all study English and maths. It could be embedded in lots of the other activities that they do, but there will be very specific targets around what that looks like. Is it maths to be able to use a recipe? Is it English to be able to know and understand the bus timetable? Or is it to be able to progress to A-level English literature? Then the work experience, and I'll cover this on the next slide, but work experience, really flexible. So we do some study programs where work experience is the core aim, and a young person will be in work 2 days a week, and they'll come into college 1 day a week. And it's not a supported internship because they don't have an EHCP. Or it's not a supported internship because we've supported them to achieve their EHCP, and they're now on an adult funded programme. Then we look at enrichment and tutorial. I really prefer enrichment to happen twice a week, or in some cases twice a day, at the start and the end, to set up and wrap up. And then enrichment, what does that mean? And quite often for us, we'll work with our young people to get them to share their knowledge, skill, behaviour, passion around what they love through enrichment. So they will actually lead enrichment activity. So last year we had a young person who wanted to be an actor, so he ran an acting class and they then performed a play. So he interviewed and recruited actors and worked with them on their stage presence and all of the other kind of variables around acting that frankly I don't understand, but he was superb at. We've got some young people who run activity groups, so it may be that they're particularly keen on an Xbox game or whatever it is. They may be collecting particular cards, it might be Doctor Who, and that's one of their pastimes. But that enrichment is far more than all looking at a Doctor Who video. It's all around that exerting preference, sharing, choice, communication, listening, respecting other people's opinions, even if we don't agree with them. So there's a big piece of work around that. And then the other things are around adjustments. So we've got quite a few young people in our cross-college provision who've got some significantly impacting physical disability. Got one young person who needs to perform quite a few medical activities before he comes in the morning. They don't finish till 9 o'clock. So why would we put him on a study program that starts at 9, making him late every day? So the manager of the curriculum area that he studies in, it's a technical area, starts the class at 10. So that the young person's not late. But he didn't just start the class for one person, he started the class for everybody. So I know that that's highly sophisticated and that that's not necessarily available to us all in every organisation, but those adjustments are possible. And then where we started was our kind of preparation, so the preparing of young people. Some of our young people progress from the bottom of this image to the top in one academic year. So they'll start by understanding social action and spending time in social environments. They'll look at what they're developing there and how that links to work skills. They might do some work-related training, some shadowing, some visiting employers or some employers visiting us. They might do an internal placement with us, our kind of services and support teams, whether that be our catering teams or our campus and careers teams. It could be my teams as far as our inclusion and support specialist teachers or our education support workers. We'll host internal placements with a view to constantly scaffolding somebody's experience to that external work placement. And those external work placements could be sustained over more than an academic year with a view to the employer creating a paid workplace at some point. So the kind of the transparency around that discussion with the employers is key, and hopefully Helen will talk a little bit about how she's managed to enable some employers to work with young people that they would never have been comfortable to work alongside. All of that obviously has to happen with an element of careers advice and guidance in place. So it's woven throughout everything we do. And for example, we have a 2-week half term in October. So a young person joins us in September, and the first formal review we do with them will be around their exit. So they have been with us for 6 weeks and we are already discussing where they are going in 30 weeks time. So what the plan is, where are they moving on to? Is it moving on to other internal provision? Is it moving up a level? Is it moving into our main curriculum delivery? Or is it going into work? So we have a work ready pathway, and that's for young people who have an EHCP and don't. Some will be supported interns, but they will be in the same group as some people who don't have an EHCP. And so it's that flexibility and that enabling everyone approach. So the co-creation part of this, and I think there's some really good emerging work to come out of this. I'm an inspector, and there's some really, I think, interesting themes that are coming out of co-creation with young people. So there's some really clear guidance, and these documents are both on the Preparation for Adulthood website, and they've both been released in the past 2 weeks. One's around an employment guide, so really simple, accessible guidance on really working with employers so that they know what you are asking for from a work placement. And also some really top tips for enabling people to participate fully in meetings, regardless of their communication method. So it's worth checking out the PFA website because they've got some really good resources on there. But that co-creation side of it needs to start with a young person. There's some kind of national guidance. So We Belong was drafted by Disability Rights UK, and this was an advisory document for the government around them creating the disability strategy. And again, some really clear messages in the National Disability Strategy about moving people into work. So it's really that nothing about us without us approach, and making sure that we are using that really positive attribute-based description of a young person. So we don't talk all about, in the first instance, what they can't do. We talk about capacity and capability, and then we talk about the adaptations or the reasonable adjustments that the Equality Act will support us to make in order to mitigate the impacts of a learning difficulty or disability. It's really shifting that language for me, and really making sure that employers are aware that that language is powerful. And so the way they talk about that, and when we've done this piece of work as an employer, the ripple effect for us has been significant, because staff do this every day. They eat, sleep and breathe this work, but it was always with somebody that you were serving, because it was with a student, and we believe in, with public servants, we're serving the student and the curriculum. But the shift has really been around serving your peers and your colleagues. So there's been something really kind of exciting for us. But we still have to push ourselves and push the people who we're working alongside beyond their zone of proximal development. And so it's, I think, quite gentle steps around acknowledging the starting point, and not kind of beating people up with their corporate social responsibility, but looking at where we can develop. And there's a really nice piece of documentation on the PFA website around leading reflection. So around how, as an organisation, have you reflected on what your leaders look like, feel like, and how we are using leadership in our organisations to enable inclusive practice, really. So there's the leadership tool, which was from 2019, and then there's new guidance, as I've already mentioned, that's come out about supported internships, and it's a revision to the guidance. It's not new guidance. I don't think we'll be getting anything new and big and meaty until after the SEN review. I'm going to pause there, and I know I've talked at you for quite a long time, and anybody that's met me or knows me knows when I get on my hobby horse and start talking about this, that's fairly normal. We're going to talk about our students, and so the caveat to this is I've asked Helen to join me. Helen is my curriculum manager for Pathway to Working Life, and it's really key that I reinforce that I'm extraordinarily proud of the progress that all of our young people make, but that progress is enabled by the teams, and Helen leads the teams. So Helen, I'm going to pause. If you just want to explain what we've done with each of our young people, and then let me know when you want me to move on.
Yeah, lovely. Hello, my name is Helen Lewis, and as Sarah says, I manage Pathway to Working Life. I'm very lucky that my job coach did a little bit of visiting for some students who are on placement. This was possibly the end of last year, just before they left us. And these are just 4 young people that left us in July 21, and touching base with them on what they're all doing now. And Luke is the first one who's come such a distance. Luke was so shy, and really independent living was something, he didn't even put his own clothes in the wash or make his own pack up. So we had a long journey to take. But he did it, and he worked really, really hard. Very proud of himself a couple of years ago when he started traveling independently. And it was evident that he would need a really understanding employer, and the Landing Pad Cafe, it just so happened we did some work enabling events a couple of years ago, and a gentleman recognised me, and we were talking, and he says, oh, I'm really interested in something long term. So that would be absolutely brilliant. Luke didn't have an EHCP, so it wasn't really a supported internship, but he was ideal because it was local to him. And with a little bit of carving and understanding, Luke went on and did so well at the cafe. And I spoke to him only last week, and he's already on the paid shifts for the weekend where it's all busy, and he's already training as well, some volunteers in the week, and he still does his placement days, which is so lovely. So he's getting the best of both worlds, and he's got such good routine to his week. The family are just amazed.
Helen, I'm just going to intervene because I really want to just reinforce. So this is a young person who came to us and was really extraordinarily shy. And he is now working in paid work, but not only that, he's using his experience to train other volunteers. Now, for me, if those other volunteers are young people with learning disability, it is absolutely magic when you are then trained by somebody, because you can see it and you can be it. So you can aspire to that and have those opportunities yourself. So go on, Helen.
Lovely. And I think it is his whole temperament. Although he was very shy, he went on to be very calming, which was lovely. Alex joined us after coming from Joseph Wright. He is a very creative young person, and he got as far as he could with the academic side, but still wasn't ready for that world of work and couldn't find something that really inspired him. When I spoke to Alex when he joined us, I did say to Alex, I think you could work. I think it's just that you're not allowing yourself to see anything but that design. So we did a two-prong attack. So Alex immediately, within the following few weeks, got a part-time job at Matalan. Almost, it was like, well, I got a job, and I said, that's brilliant. So now let's also provide that passion, and we supported him in setting up his own business. And he started doing Christmas and cards and portraits for friends and family, and now he advertises on Etsy, and he's going from strength to strength with that. And I think he just needs that onward confidence and encouragement to talk to somebody. And Alex actually decided to come back one day a week on our adult options, which is our adult SFA funded pathway, and he's doing so well. He's able to discuss the kind of things and the ideas he's got for the future, and I'm really hoping that that business takes off. And he's still doing his Matalan work, which is excellent. Brandon, a young man, although he came from a specialist school, Brandon didn't have an education, health and care plan. He came from almost a socially deprived background, but he had a very strong view that he wanted to be independent as quick as possible, but had no idea about careers, had no idea about work. Unfortunately, school didn't give him that much of a leg up in that direction. But actually, as Brandon developed those preparation for adult skills and became really eager to be going out, one thing that really ticked his box is working for himself, or almost having that push that was from himself. And that's exactly where we thought that that's his career ahead. He did some work at Makeney Hall, Makeney Hotel, and he absolutely loved it. He now has his own gardening business, and he has a regulars, and 6 months on, he's got a full array of tools, and it's just wonderful to hear him and how happy he is, and the success he's got has inspired his brothers and sisters to go on and do something. So I think for Brandon, he was just so happy that he made a difference in his home as well as for himself. Josh, again, came to us very academic. He'd achieved a level 3 in creative media. Josh did have an EHCP, and the reason he was allowed to do that extra year we negotiated with the local authorities, because a lot of his outcomes for his own social, holistic moving forward hadn't been addressed. It was not long that Josh had been with us, only about 6 months, and speaking with him, IT Collections seemed to be able to offer that IT hands-on that Josh was looking for. He really hit the ground running there. They took to him, they absolutely were supportive, and Josh started coming out of his shell to the point where they offered him an apprenticeship very early on. So he was only with us a year, and it was just absolutely wonderful. And Mum just can't believe he's the same person. So we always had that ability, and it was just a matter of working on those core skills to be more independent.
So thank you ever so much, Helen.
Not at all.
So I think it's just worth mentioning that all 4 of those young people Helen has spoken to in the last week, and we have shared their story and their images with their permission. So you know, we were delighted, and we would regularly stay in touch with those young people. If things look like they're wobbling, we would try and do some work with them and the employer. And it is you know, really worth thinking about the last young person that Helen spoke about, because he had successfully completed a qualification at level 3 and really not had a conversation with anybody. His social skills were really nowhere near in parallel with his academic ability around IT. And I kind of like to think of it that he's found his people. He's found other people who speak IT. And I think there's something really, there's real potential in enabling young people to know and understand that part of themselves, and to really be okay with their authentic self, and be okay with that. I found my people. I know where the geeks are. I'm going to be with the geeks, and that's absolutely fine. So I think there's something for me around that. I have to say that a lot of the work we've done at the college has been really, it takes a long time to have these discussions and to change curriculum, and to know that we are meeting the needs of our community, and that the provision, you know, it is of a good standard. But I'll go back. Our aspiration is that the Education Inspection Framework outstanding criteria are the minimum starting point. And Helen and my other manager, Benny, are really proud of the fact that 69.9% of our young people leave and go into work, and the remaining 31% go into a meaningful adult life outcome. But for me, we're failing by 30%, because everybody should have the choice to be able to go to work. So that's the kind of, I'm drawing to a close there. I'm really grateful for you listening to us. There is an email address on the screen if anybody wants anything, or if anybody wants to kind of ask any questions. I'm sure Alistair is going to enable that to happen. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I apologise for just rambling on at you for all that time.
No, huge thanks, Sarah, for a fantastic session and so thought-provoking. I scribbled away and made masses of notes here whilst you were going through your slides, Sarah, and I always learn so much whenever I listen to you speak, or I'm in conversation with you, and some of those things to pick out in terms of the language, the use of language for all of us there, to reflect on the language we use and the impact that has. Again, the statistics you shared earlier, thinking about our own zone of proximal development being a really, really key point there, and just amazing to have Helen share those really positive outcomes for those young people there, which again just lifts everything for us. So a huge thank you for just an amazing session, and I'm sure lots of us will go away and consider and reflect on our own practice, and some comments coming through the chat function there saying thank you for a fantastic session. So at the moment I can see no questions that are there, Sarah. So I think such a comprehensive session that you've given us, and so much information, but I'm sure that there's opportunities for colleagues if they want to come back, either with the contact details that you've shared, and also opportunities to engage us at Whole School Send. And we'd be really keen to hear input from colleagues in terms of, from the sessions that you've attended as part of this webinar series, kind of what you've gone back on and reflected on within your own setting. Can you share some great practice that's working particularly well for you? Because we want to shine a light on those amazing things. And I can see a comment from Mark from IMAS in the chat, and Mark's going to be joining us with some young people to share their stories, and really a big focus on learner voice in our next session, young people in the world of inclusive sport. So really looking forward to that session on the 23rd. So a huge thank you again from me, Sarah, to you and Helen and all the team, and for the amazing work that you do, and really look forward to seeing everyone on the next session on the 23rd. And thanks again to everyone for giving so generously of their time when we know how busy things are within your own setting. So look forward to seeing you on the 23rd, and wishing you a great evening. Thanks, everyone.